So, welcome to Scrolling to Death. I'm Nikki, and I'm happy to be joined by Laura Marquez Garrett. Laura is a Harvard Law School graduate in private practice for many years, and last year she joined the Social Media Victims Law Center, which seeks to hold social media companies accountable for harms they inflict on vulnerable users. So, welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to get into it. So, I first saw you speak virtually during a panel for an event called Safe Tech, Safe Kids, which was put on by Issue One, Project Liberty, and Five Rights Foundation. And on this panel, a statement was directed to you, and I'll quote: social media can be considered a positive thing because it helps people find a community and express their identity. And specifically, the moderator was speaking about queer youth. And I loved the question that you posed in response. So I'll remind you that you asked, what have the social media platforms actually provided that the internet did not provide these kids before the companies came around? And frankly, I don't think there's an upside. And I wanted to yell through the screen like, hell yes, because there's just been so many articles and conversations and books which go into so much detail on the benefits first of social media before they get into the harms. And I just don't feel, it just rubs me the wrong way. I feel like we've all been sort of turned into promotional robots for big tech.
Mm.
And I wonder if you can just expand your thoughts around this and the benefits versus the harms of social media.
Yeah, it's completely a big tech narrative, and we hear it all the time. And that was something, I think that's the first time I'd sort of articulated it, sort of out loud in front of people. But it had been getting under my skin for so long because I always hear, it does have benefits. And when you look at the research, I mean, even the testing that's done where they say, well, it benefits, 20x, 25% of kids, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I had started to stop and say, well, we didn't conduct that research pre-social media, but if we had, I suspect that it would have been 80%, right? I think it would have helped more people because ultimately, I was coming into my own in 1995. I go off to college.
Mm-hmm.
The internet was new at that point, and I looked for resources. And guess what? There they were. I
Mm-hmm.
found chat rooms. I found local resources. I found national level resources. I found people I could speak with. Like, my group of friends, we were all trying to figure out who we were. We were all in the process of our own coming out journey,
Mm-hmm.
and the internet itself provided all of these resources that social media wants to take credit for now.
Mm.
And so in thinking about it, it's like what are they providing our children? They didn't create the internet, right? The COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, other legislation, the litigation. These things are not about the internet at large.
Mm-hmm.
They are about social media platforms and those types of platforms and technologies that are being used to target children, which is not the internet.
Right. And so these resources can still be available outside of the social media platforms.
100%. In fact, I'm going to say that if we, and this is sort of another prediction, but if we got some real legislation or any legislation, but if we were to stop them from a lot of the most harmful things they do, the addictive mechanisms, the dark patterns, I actually think that we would open up the playing field for other ethical designers, right? So you have ethical designers and engineers who would love to get their apps out there, their platforms,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be like a tobaccoless cigarette trying to compete with RJR.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it, and you see that if you look at, if you watch what is the Social Dilemma, a lot of those
Yep.
movies, you see that early on, many of these designers left these companies because they couldn't sleep at night and they
Yeah.
didn't want to be a part of hurting kids. Um, if those folks had an even playing field, if these companies weren't allowed to addict our children, to lock them into their products, to exploit them,
Mm-hmm.
I actually think we'd have a lot more resources out there.
Yeah. So tell me about your light bulb moment that led you to the Social Media Victims Law Center. So you were in private practice for what, almost 20 years before you moved
I think
over?
over 20 years. I think
Yeah.
over 20 years, business litigation with a specialty in electronic discovery, electronic data,
Mm-hmm.
and that light bulb moment was meeting the founder of our firm, Social Media Victims Law Center, Matt Bergman, reading his first complaint, which was about a young girl named Selena Rodriguez. She was 11 when she took her own life and posted it on Snapchat. Reading that and then watching The Social Dilemma, that was the light bulb moment. It was at the end of the film when they asked these designers, "Do you let your kids use these products that you helped design?" And it was a emphatic no. Not a chance. They're not allowed. And as somebody who'd been representing manufacturers, designers, retailers for many, many years, um, that was the moment where I said, wow, so they know that their products are harming children and
Right.
they're still marketing and distributing them to our kids.
Right.
And so for me as a parent, I have four very young children, and um, I'm a, I guess I heard this recently, a ferocious parent, right? I've
Hmm.
always just said overprotective even by parent standards, but that for me was, we don't have a choice here because they're coming for my kids next. And to everyone out there, they are coming for your kids next. You've got, as parents, we need to stand up to these companies, and we need to protect our children.
100%. And 2020, watching The Social Dilemma, was I was pregnant and I was already second guessing, like posting my kids online. I was questioning myself. Why am I doing this? How does it benefit them? This profile that's supposed to be about me is all pictures of my kids. And my daughter, my oldest, was getting to be a girl, and that's her body and her should be her choice. Having all these questions and then watching that Social Dilemma, I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm done. And so deleted Instagram and then obviously didn't post my last child, and it didn't really matter. Like no one cared.
Yeah.
I updated all the people
Yeah.
that need to be updated through text message and calling and FaceTiming, and I think once you know some of these things, and once that was a big one with the tech firm, the people that work at the tech firms not letting their kids use social media, not posting their kids on social media, and a lot of them going to the executives and saying this is harmful, and then the executives not releasing that information.
Right.
More and more of
And
that's
we're
coming
learning
out.
more and more about that every day, right?
Yep.
So we see these whistleblowers now. It's
Yep.
shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just shocking, it's terrifying what the leadership knew.
Yeah. And it makes you think, how does Mark Zuckerberg and these upper management level people go to sleep at night knowing what their product is doing to kids?
Right. Right.
Okay. So, the families that you represent are, have been harmed by social media in some way. And if you had to say, like, what are some, this is hard to say, but what are some trends in how the kids are being harmed? Like, what do parents need to be aware of?
So it is hard to say, so
Yeah.
I'm a pattern person, and that's why I always loved electronic evidence, electronic discovery.
Yeah.
And so right, I mean, I personally have spoken with, I think, over 200 families, kids, different ages,
Hmm.
different situations. As a collective, we've spoken with over 1,000 of these families and the folks in our firm,
Hmm.
and we've been engaged by over 2,000.
Hmm.
And there are absolutely trends.
Okay. Great.
So early on, some of what we learned about these products before knowing the information that's out now, we were able to identify, hey, we think that this platform is doing this based on story after story after story. And I'll give you one example.
Hmm.
A young girl said, and this is all in the public record. A young girl said, when I was 8, I was using my a family member's Snapchat, and it was really fun. And it was sending photos. It was exactly what Snapchat says it is.
Hmm.
And I had some friends on there, and we would exchange silly photos with the filters, and it was great and it was wonderful. She turns 12, and she now has access through another sort of inroad. She's able to access Snapchat. And
Hmm.
so she opens her own Snapchat account without telling any of the adults in her life. And it was like an entirely different product. And so she says, look, I don't understand, right? I mean, they say they don't even have public profiles, but some of these young people have said, I felt more exposed on Snapchat than Instagram. Now, that's not to say it's not happening on Instagram, but for an app that says we don't have public profiles, what she reported is this was an entirely different product.
Hmm.
I opened this Snapchat account and I'm getting, and pardon the language, I'm getting dick pics from random strangers. I'm being solicited. Snap is pushing the quick ad. You may know these people. These may be your friends. And side note, for a lot of these young kids, they don't, they're children. We can't lose sight of the fact that they're children. I've had children say to me, I thought I knew these people, right? These Instagram, Snapchat, they said I knew these people. They said it would be fun. It just is a different product for children than it is for adults. And I lost a little bit of track there, but basically you have this child who says, look, on an adult's account, Snapchat worked how it was advertised. When I opened my own account, it was constant predation, constant. I mean, at 12 years old, I'm getting dick pics, which I've never seen in my life. And I've had multiple young people tell me this. It's the same with Instagram. It's the same with Facebook, TikTok. I have seen TikTok accounts And this is actually really shocking, and I'm going to say it because parents need to know. I have spoken to young people who have told me that they have seen live suicides and murders on TikTok Live. I have asked adults how many, they've seen, and I have yet to meet an adult who is getting this material from these apps. I will tell you, and it's incredibly depressing. I spoke to a child who was under 13 recently, and asked this child, "How have you ever seen a live suicide?" No hesitation, yes. I've spoken to multiple children who've seen live suicides, and I try to explain to them, you realize as an adult, I have never seen a live suicide. That is not something these platforms send to me. It's not just TikTok Live. I've spoken to some children who've seen it on, I believe, Facebook Live. Another young person recently said, on Instagram, she said, I'm not seeing the live suicide and murders, but Instagram is recommending websites to me that include really violent stuff with videos of actual violence happening, in addition to self harm, suicide, all of that. So these platforms operate differently for children, and that's something that we were able to figure out as a pattern early on. And we've been able to test it since, and adults, parents can test it themselves, right? Like opening accounts as a child and see what happens. Other patterns, certain platforms, for example, we see a lot of suicides in connection with TikTok. You'll get into those accounts and you'll see that the child was put into a rabbit hole of sorts, where even if they're searching for positive content, and often we can see these search terms, they are still getting suicide. So it's normalizing, it's recommending suicide. Really, and I have to tell you, until you see the videos that I'm referring to as an adult who was never exposed to this, it's really violent stuff.
Mm-hmm.
um, Really violent and explicit, and things that I think most of us can't fathom. But these kids are getting it for hours and hours, even when they're searching for other things.
So we know that these kids don't have a fully developed brain. And I mean, the big thing I
Right.
can think of is, are the platforms just taking advantage of the fact that they are not fully developed and they're more easily addicted and manipulated by the platforms?
100%. 100%. In fact, and I can send it to you later. There's one of the Facebook documents that was disclosed, 2 years ago, and is out in the public sphere. There's actually pictures of brains showing the undeveloped frontal lobe. There's like an arrow pointing to it and saying, that young users, their frontal lobes don't develop until I think 24, 25.
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about changes that can be made to the platform to capture that audience, right? It's 100%. And I think, is it Sean Parker at Meta? I mean, back in 2017, he made a statement to the effect of, we knew what we were doing to children's brains, right? We were targeting that vulnerability, to release these dopamine hits that would keep kids hooked. And we knew what we were doing, and we did it anyway.
This gives me like full body chills. How is this allowed? Like, how is this
Right.
okay? And how are parents still allowing their kids on these platforms?
So I want to address that last point first, because
Yes.
many parents, we work with every race, religion, background, socioeconomic status, one parents, two parents, grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
parents that never allowed their child to have a phone, parents that did but put software on it to try and protect them, parents that said no to so basically, the one thing all these families have in common is the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I would say, for parents, many parents don't allow it, but
Right.
they don't have a means to stop it. We
Mm-hmm.
have some kids who are literally only getting access through school devices, and schools
Mm-hmm.
are saying, well, this is our curriculum. If your
Mm-hmm.
kid doesn't have a device, they don't move forward.
Right.
So you have a mix of parents that just don't know what to do. They're
Mm-hmm.
frustrated. Maybe they allowed it but they only allowed TikTok because it looked like silly dance videos. And that's what TikTok said it was,
Right.
right? Or they allow bits and pieces. But the issue is that nobody, until recently, and even now, nobody has any real sense of what these companies are doing, how they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one example of YouTube Kids.
Yeah. I
You know,
hate YouTube kids.
right? And
Yeah.
and so, content aside, let's say you're lucky enough that they're not slipping in really dangerous content in there.
Yep. Yep.
Fine. But the interface, the format, the way that these short videos are hooking kids,
Mm-hmm.
as adults, we don't realize it. It looks like a kids show streaming app. It comes pre-installed on our TVs. It did. So my kids were watching YouTube before I knew what YouTube was,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then if you're watching YouTube Kids, it's like, but it's YouTube Kids. It's
Yeah.
safe for kids.
Right.
But but that's not calculating in what it's doing to your child's brain.
Hmm.
I can tell you that when I started this work and I said, hey, no more YouTube, I had to wean one of my children off, like literally wean, because when we said, nope, your screen time allocation, like no YouTube, no
Hmm.
YouTube Kids,
Yep.
she freaked out, right? I
Yeah.
mean, literally, what can I break to get YouTube back? What now? Imagine a parent who doesn't see what I see every day on the back end.
Right.
It's easy to just be like, it's just a TV show for kids. It's just a
Yeah.
streaming app for
And no
kids.
one wants to deal with that outbreak like that,
Right.
right? Temper
Now
tantrum.
imagine being a single parent
Hmm.
or, a working household where there isn't a parent who can even go and do that, right? Your
Hmm.
child is maybe in a program after school or with grandparents or aunts and uncles or something.
Yep.
It's the way these platforms are designed. They are
Hmm.
designed to ensure that your children can access them no matter what you do. Really quick, we had one case of a young person who was like, I used to go to the library and I used those computers. And so
Yeah.
my mom thought she was sending me to the library.
Oh man, we're shit out of luck.
So it feels that way, right? It
Right?
feels that way because they have designed these platforms to ensure that your child can get on it no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And look, there's no easy solution because of Section 230, because the technology developed so rapidly
Right.
that nobody saw what was happening,
Right.
right? Because we had no regulation, we couldn't see behind the scenes. We didn't know what they were doing to us.
Right.
Um, it feels hopeless often,
Hmm.
but what I would say is like baby steps, right? So first
Yeah.
off, as a parent, if your kid's getting on there, you don't want them on there, write the companies, find every possible avenue to put them on notice. It,
Hmm.
it may not change anything, but as things change, it could down the road.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's sort of one thing. Like put these companies on notice, get involved in the effort, like reach out to organizations that are trying to stand up. I know there's someone right now trying to create like a parents group. Look for ways to make a difference, right? Look for
Yeah.
people who can come speak to your school, talk to your teachers. One of my kids came home one day and said, hey mom, if YouTube is so dangerous, why did we see a YouTube video in class today?
Hmm.
And it broke my heart, right? Because
Yeah.
and that's my 8-year old. And I said, look, a lot of folks don't understand why it's dangerous, right? So you've got teachers showing YouTube videos because they're very educational
Right.
without really understanding when a child watches that, they're going to go home and say, hey, I saw this great educational video on YouTube. Can I watch the
Hmm.
YouTube?
Hmm.
And a parent who doesn't know any better is going to say, oh, okay, your teacher's showing
If
it
you're
to you. It
watching it
must
in
be safe.
class. Right. Well, and in my kids' elementary school, in kindergarten, they're getting iPads in class and has
Ugh,
Safari on it. And I've talked about this a lot, but has Safari
yeah.
internet. Some websites are blocked, but YouTube, adult YouTube is available,
Wow.
which I pulled up in front of my son's first grade teacher and scrolled just a little bit down. There's like a woman's butt in a thong bikini right in front of my face. And I'm like, this is my first grader's iPad that he uses
Wow.
without you watching what he's doing. And so there's such a separation of what the schools are just giving these devices, and then it's up to every teacher to kind of implement what they'd
It's
like in the
crazy.
classroom. The first grade teacher uses it as a reward. Like if they finish early, you get more iPad
Mm,
time.
mm.
So it can, right, it can feel
Shouldn't
overwhelming.
parents have, but I have to ask, I mean, on that one, like, shouldn't parents have a say? That's crazy to me. Like, shouldn't parents have a say in that, especially if it's being used as a reward?
Yeah.
Um, that's crazy to me at that age. And look, I'll tell you, and I'll tell all parents, I've got I've got data from accounts that you can see right in there, that these children were in class being exploited, right? In class saying to these strangers on these apps, I can't talk except in school because my parents have Wi-Fi locked down at home. They've taken away my
Oh
phone,
my God.
right? So I'm going to tell parents and teachers right now, like if a kid can access, particularly if they can access the internet, you can now get Snapchat on the internet. You can also get Instagram, Meta. If that
Hmm.
device is not locked down and monitored almost on a near constant basis, which they can't do, it's not possible.
No.
Um, you could have children sitting in your classroom being harmed. It's insane.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the addictiveness of the platforms just for parents to kind of understand. And I have a quote to share. So people think that social media gives them more of what they want. And I loved what Imran Ahmed said. He's with the Center for Countering Digital Hate. He said, social media doesn't give you more of what you like. It gives you more of what it wants you to like. And
Yep.
it gives you more of what keeps you addicted. So any expansion on that you can share?
Yeah, it's not what you want. It's what the technology has determined you can't look away from. And so an example which I gave a little bit ago is I have two 16-year-old boys, 16-year-old young men who are on TikTok and looking for uplifting content, and they're getting suicide videos, right?
Hmm.
Because the platform has determined this 16-year-old, if I give them what they're actually asking for, they're likely to
Hmm.
turn off TikTok, to go ask for help, to do something other than watch the app, which is making TikTok money. And so the technologies are programmed with engagement first, right? These are not traditional search engines, which are programmed typically to show you what you want to see.
Right.
I ask for A, I get A because that's what a search engine's for.
Hmm.
These are programmed for engagement first, which means the company's the engagement
Hmm.
is the top priority no matter the cost. And so these platforms, as currently designed, are not showing you what you want. They're showing you what they think you can't look away from.
Right.
And the other example I always give people is we've all been driving down the street and there's a car accident up ahead. Excuse me. And we think to ourselves, I'm not going to look for so
Hmm.
many reasons. I'm not going to look. I don't need to see it. I'm going to be, hold up traffic. I'm not
Yeah.
going to look.
Right. And you're judging everyone else who's looking and slowing down.
And then how many times when you drive past, it's that
Right.
human reflex to look.
Right.
But
Totally.
that's in an adult. Now put that in a kid. They don't
Hmm.
have the I'm not going to look, I'm not going to look mentality. It's just what is that? It's curiosity. It's that undeveloped frontal lobe. It's being led by emotions as a
Yeah.
result of where their brain is. And so with these apps, these platforms, it's crazy. And that's why I say if you open one of these accounts as a child and pretend that you're a child, and as a parent, like use it as a
Hmm.
child and see what happens,
Right.
um, because it is targeting these kids. It is not giving them what they want. And frankly, we wouldn't be here if it was. And that's one of the big things when we talk about the First Amendment, we talk about things like the Kids Online Safety Act. Within the Kids Online Safety Act, there is a limitation where the apps cannot be held responsible if the child is searching, if they see what they've sought out, right? So
Okay.
it's you search it, you see it.
Right.
Our children make all their own bad decisions. They don't need these platforms making them for them. If a kid
Right.
goes online, even under COSA, and they search for suicide and they get suicide, whether we agree with that or not, that's your sort of First Amendment argument, right?
Yeah.
What we're talking about here, though, are these platforms addicting kids, right? Purposefully doing things that they know are going to send dopamine, engaging them through various mechanisms, literally dark patterns. So they're building things into the interface that are meant to manipulate them into doing things they wouldn't otherwise do. And then on top, you layer on top of that, these kids are being sent stuff they never sought out. They
Hmm.
don't want to see in many instances,
Hmm.
but these platforms have chosen it for them.
Let's dive in a little bit I want to talk about Snapchat specifically. And because across the board, when I hear stories about social media harms, I feel like Snapchat is often the platform where I'm reading it. And so it's particularly concerning platform because they have tons of addictive features like the streaks where kids are
Yep.
incentivized to log in every day, like rewards for their activity, badges, icons. Also, there's no natural breaks built in, endless scroll. And the biggest issue I see is the disappearing message feature, which just encourages dangerous behavior. And predators are literally flocking to Snapchat because of this feature. Um, but I have a lot of parents reaching out to me saying, all of my kids' friends, you've heard this a million times, all my
Yeah.
kids' friends are on Snapchat and they don't want their kid to be left out. And how do they deal with
Mm.
that? And they have to weigh the benefits of their kid being connected to their friends against the harms of Snapchat. So wondering if I'm right in that Snapchat is a very harmful platform. And what would you advise parents who are worried about their kids being like left out of talking to their friends on
Yeah.
there?
So I will say, I mean, I think Instagram is also harmful for. I mean, so there's other harmful platforms, right? TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, YouTube for different reasons. A couple of things with Snap that I want because I've spoken with parents and kids who didn't realize this. The disappearing messages, the word disappearing, is a little misleading because we still always think, hey, once it's out there, it's out there. So for the record, one of the things that makes Snap very different, it's not just disappearing. They have, and I don't know the details of it, right? But their servers, their systems are set up on the back end so that it's either not preserved or destroyed affirmatively. So legitimately, if
Oh.
I'm a criminal and I'm engaged, if I'm a predator and I want to engage with children, Snap
Mm-hmm.
is going to be an app of choice
Mm-hmm.
because the Snap systems, it's not like Instagram where my communications with the child will probably be saved somewhere, at least some of them. And I've seen inside Instagram accounts where I'm able to see, I've actually made 2 NCMEC reports, which is horrific. That's like when we identify, okay, we see this data and this child's being actively exploited. There's CSAM in there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that stuff will stick around on Instagram because it's not being destroyed by
Mm-hmm.
as a course of business, right? Something a lot of folks don't realize is that stuff on Snap, it's gone. Unless
Wow.
somebody has taken another device and screenshot it, it's gone. And that also means if something happens to your child and the police go to Snap, they can get some data. It's not, there's still metadata. You can often see who talked to who and when, but
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the content. I'm going to add another Snap feature that most parents don't know about. It is a encrypted data vault within Snapchat. It's called My Eyes Only. You can now see it on a screen. I think it used to be set up so you couldn't even see it. You had to know what to swipe to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an encrypted data vault within what's being marketed as a kids app. So the when your child sets up an account, they have that PIN. Nobody else has the PIN, and Snap claims to have set it up so that even Snap can't recover the PIN. So as a side note, and I've talked to children who are like, look, I wish I had never used that data vault because my parents would have found out what was going on sooner had I not been hiding all of the exploitative pics in there, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can save stuff in that data vault. It is inaccessible to everyone, including Snap, including police. I've had police officers tell me we can't crack it because it's encrypted. That's within Snap itself. In fact, we just submitted a declaration in a case where I'm trying to think of where an officer said, "Look, what makes it so dangerous is it's hidden inside Snap. I mean, it's in Snap. It's not like a standalone encrypted data vault where a parent would look at that phone and be like, hey, why do you have this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I would just say to parents, Snap does a whole lot more than just letting your kids chat with their friends. It's everything you've said is right. I mean, we see a lot of exploitation. I said earlier, we've got kids who will sign up and start an account and they will get just explicit photos everywhere. They will get quick ad recommendations, which I think Snap is making some changes now,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know the extent of those. I think they also rolled out some kind of a parent feature that you can check and see if you can use that. At the end of the day, it's a dangerous platform, and so it's weighing that. I have young children; they're not old enough yet to be like, I need this.
Right.
But if things don't change when they are, for me, seeing the dark side of it, seeing the harms, the impacts, which you have started to see now too, and they are incredible, and so terrible. It, for me, it's going to come down to just am I willing to take that risk? I will add one more piece though, which I do sometimes tell parents who are like, look, I'm going to give my kid a Snap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do say there is, okay, if that is your choice as a parent, one thing you could do as a parent to make it a little bit safer, I believe, is you could open the account yourself as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
You could use it yourself a little bit, maybe add some adult friends, maybe a group of parents even could get on Snap, add some adult friends, make it so that Snap believes that the user is an adult. And at that point, do it for a couple weeks. And at that point, if your child, then put your child on, and I think it makes it a little safer, right? I can't guarantee it makes it safe because at some point the algorithms could figure out that you're not an adult. But
Yeah.
it does give your child a better chance of staying safe if the company thinks that it's an adult, the
Yeah.
user's an adult.
I mean, it's a good tip, but it's so messed up that we have to pretend that our kids are
So messed up.
adults for it to be safer for them
Right,
to use.
right. I will tell you same thing with TikTok. So what I tell adults with TikTok is if you're going to allow TikTok, please, make it an open conversation with your kids. Say, hey, I'm okay with TikTok, but I'm going to check your TikTok account every other day.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it every 3 days, every 5 days, because with TikTok, often what you'll find is when the algorithm turns, it turns fast, and your kid can get thrown into a really deep, dark hole, like bad, like
Mm-hmm.
suicide content, self harm,
Fast. Yep.
really fast. So I often will tell people if you're going to let them have TikTok, take 5 minutes every other day, check their For You page, and watch for the full 5 minutes. Don't watch one or two videos and, oh, this looks fine. Watch for the full 5 minutes, and don't get complacent, right? Like, don't hit a point where you're like, oh, I've done this every day and it's fine. It's all silly dance videos because it can turn. And so just
Yeah.
it's 5 minutes every other day to make sure that your kid is not being shown something that is just really bad.
Right.
And that's another step that, again, it doesn't guarantee protections, but it will help. It will help.
Yeah. It's good to have options, but I'm in the same boat right now. If things don't change, I'm leaning towards no, my kids don't need to have access to that. I'll get together with my kids' friends' parents and say, hey,
Yep.
like, let's talk about the harms. And then as a group,
Yep.
decide that we want our kids to be able to just text on group text messages that we check
That'd be
here and there. But,
amazing.
right?
That'd be amazing. I mean, if you had the ability, and of course, many people don't, but if you have that ability to connect with your kids' friends and say, like, let's make sure they can chat.
Yeah.
Right? The problem is it's not the realities of our world, and that's because big tech has made it not the realities. I mean, it's a couple weeks ago I was thinking about this. It's the Trojan horse. If you
Mm-hmm.
think about all the Chromebooks that have been given to schools, if you think about
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you can get 4 smartphones for free. Often they'll have these deals. You can get 4 smartphones for free, but
Right.
a phone costs you 140 bucks a pop. I've literally had low income families say to me, I, my kid needed a phone, and I had one
Mm-hmm.
that said I checked and a flip phone. I couldn't afford it, but they're going to give
Wow.
me 4 smartphones, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
Trojan horse. At a certain point, if we don't stand up to these companies, we become powerless because they're already in our schools. They've got entire districts saying, "Oh, this is a part of our curriculum," and people thinking that your kids have to have an iPad at age 6 to learn how to navigate the internet, which again is not true.
Right.
You can teach this in school. You can teach them about curriculum. You can teach them about the dangers of certain, aspects of being online. You can teach them all of that without putting access to social media platforms in their hands.
Yeah. And they are making, they call them kid safe phones now. So companies like Bark and Trumi and Pinwheel have phones that do not allow social media
Yep,
apps. And a lot of
yep,
them don't even have internet browsers. And they're
yep.
very locked down and monitored by the parent. They are um, Samsung phones because iPhones don't really allow you to strip it down and add the
Yep.
software on top. But an option for parents, and they were having a free phone deal this holiday, which I thought was,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
right. So
Read
okay,
read all the read all the so that, I think that's amazing, and I actually think to lock it down you've got to lock down on a device level because any software
yeah,
you can just build new software to get around.
yeah,
So I think it is going to be device level lockdown where you can control the device. The only tip on that I'd have for parents is read everything carefully because I've seen cases where parents will get a phone, the ones that do have like some access, even texting. So I gave you an example earlier. If a kid has access to social media platforms at school,
hmm,
they can make these dangerous contacts. Then you get them the phone, but now all they have to do is give their phone number away,
yeah,
right? And now they can text these folks. So
yeah,
read everything carefully, watch the videos that these phones put out, make sure you know what you can do and can't do because you want to take advantage of every tool that's built into that device.
yeah. And it's not a set it and forget it situation. You have to
Right.
continually be looking at it
You
and continually updating and approving contacts and all of that.
do.
um,
And
yeah,
something we don't talk about often, and I don't know how effective this would be, but it's also talking now that we're learning more about these dangers, right? And it's talking to kids, and it's hard because I think most people don't know the extent of it. Like most people aren't reading the unredacted attorney general complaints that were
mm-hmm,
filed recently,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And I'll tell you what, one came out in New Mexico last week that is explosive, that
mm-hmm.
is frankly terrifying. I mean, it's almost to the point of like your kids might be safer on Pornhub than Instagram, and I'm not kidding.
Okay,
And that's the crazy part, right? I'm not kidding.
yeah,
So check out the unredacted New Mexico. I can send you one after this, but
okay, great,
the problem is that's not readily accessible to everyone. So they're not,
yeah,
but I would say, if parents start reading about these issues, start seeing what these companies are doing. I know obviously my own kids get it all the time. We talk about it day in and day out.
mm-hmm,
But for some of these young people, I would like, again, I mean, kids, and we don't let kids pick their own classes in high school because of that frontal lobe not being fully
mm-hmm,
developed, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But at least having those dialogues and saying, look, here's what's dangerous, because it's not what we all thought it was. It's not like, oh, just the internet, you can meet strangers. It's, hey, here's what's dangerous. Like these companies are showing you what they want to show you to help them, even if it hurts you. These companies are normalizing suicide and self-harm. In fact, they are leaning towards it on kids. They're filling some of these kids' feeds. These companies are going to try and connect you to strangers. Just so you know, when these companies say you may know this person, they may be your friend, they're not your friend.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Your friend will be someone you meet in real life and says, hey, I have a Snapchat. Do you want to exchange QR codes or whatever
Yeah.
they're called, right?
Yeah.
It's some of it is going to be, I don't know, maybe that would help to be able to have those conversations with kids. It's just, It's crazy when they're on
Yeah.
these platforms, and especially because of the dependencies that are developed. I mean, these kids cannot stop. We as adult, many of us adults don't understand that. I mean, some of us
Mm-hmm.
do. Like I have a Facebook and it's hard, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to not check it.
Right.
But imagine that for a 13-year-old kid.
Yeah. And you mentioned suicide. So unfortunately, in talking about social media now, we have to talk about suicide rate,
Hmm.
and rates in young people of suicide are skyrocketing. It's now the second leading cause of death for kids age 15 to 24. And to compare, in the year 2000, it wasn't even in the top 10 causes of death for this age
Right,
group.
right.
Um, and it's not just numbers or a statistic. It's like actual children, like Carson Bride, who I just talked to his mom last week. It's Nate
Yeah.
Bronstein, who I talked to Laura last week. It's Selena Rodriguez that you mentioned, who was 11 years old when she died by suicide. And you said she posted the suicide onto
Yep.
Snapchat.
Yep.
Did
So 11
Snapchat catch
baby.
it? Did Snap?
No, no. I mean, look, we have no, but they're not looking. None of these platforms are looking,
Oh,
and that's the Section 230 issue, right? They'll say, but we don't have a duty to look.
until it's flagged, right?
Look, yeah, no, they don't even look at it. I mean, they still will say they don't have a duty to look, right? But that's one of the things is the reporting mechanisms need to be fixed. There's no 1-800. Look, I dare you to, any parent, go find a 1-800 number for one of these platforms and call it. I would be shocked if you found a number. I have a parent who showed up at Snap's headquarters to alert them to a drug dealer that she'd already tried to alert them to, and she was told, you need to move your car, we're going to tow it. Right? We have a case. You talk about taking it down. We have a case where a young person died by suicide, and the videos leading up to their death were posted to TikTok, and police called TikTok after their death and said, "Hey, um, these videos are up there. You need to take them down." They show this young person with the everything right there, crying, saying they're going to commit suicide, which they then did. TikTok did not take those videos down and said you can
Holy
get a
sh-
court order. And so then several months later, I think it could have been weeks, let's say it's months, a local reporter, found out about the story and called TikTok, and that thing was down within 24 hours. That is not a one-off story. That is
Mm.
something that happens. And
So if it
so what?
affects the PR, they'll take it down, but not
Yes.
not a
100%.
lead.
So those
Worse than I
videos are
thought.
on there. So those, oh no, 100%. And that's not the only time we've heard that, where something has been reported, half a dozen times. Police have reported it, parents have reported it, kids have reported it, and it's up until a reporter calls, and then it's down within hours, up for months, down within hours when a reporter calls. That we've seen that on. I can think of a Snapchat instance. I can think of a TikTok. I'd have to think a bit more on Meta on that
Hmm.
one. But well, I can think of one now on Meta where a parent reported something and Meta's like, oh, okay, and takes down one, but there's 15 identical ones. Which, by the way, if you track that metadata within there, like Meta could find those in a heartbeat. It's not about
Wow.
monitoring or censoring.
Wow.
So that is the situation it's presented with. Is if it's going to create a PR nightmare, that thing will come down. But that so like that young person I was talking about, I mean, those that video is being sent out, right? So what many kids are seeing, and talk with your kids about this, what many kids are seeing in addition to the risk of the live suicide, the live murder, the live shootings, all of that stuff, they are seeing massive amounts of content that is glorifying things that we know are dangerous,
Hmm.
glorifying suicide, self-harm, disordered eating.
Hmm.
And I think we underestimate the impact that has on their brains, right? On all brains. I can tell you as an adult, watching these videos for hours.
Hmm.
For me, when I started seeing a counselor after I started this work, was actually watching these videos for hours. I had this moment where suicide seemed, there was almost like a flash of like suicide seems like something that's a normal option when you're really upset. And I was like, what is this? and
Right.
and that is somebody who has never thought of suicide as normal. After
Hmm.
watching hours and hours of these videos, because it normalizes it. Now imagine that's as a 40 something year old with
Hmm.
a home, a family, a career that I love, right? Like if that, all of those anchor points that many of us are fortunate enough to
Hmm.
have, and with all of those anchor points, if those videos are impacting my mental health, imagine what
Hmm.
they're doing to a child.
Right. I mean, even as an adult, not growing up with social media as a teenager, and not being faced with any suicide content, and then
Right,
having a suicide within my family as an
right.
adult. Now now it's an option for anyone. I'm thinking about it. It's like changed my brain in just being introduced to it, like,
Right.
personally. And I can't imagine thinking, seeing all that content as a teenager, your brain's developing and thinking that is normal. It's no wonder these kids are dealing with a very stressful
Yep.
situation like sextortion or cyberbullying, and thinking
Yep.
that that's an option for them.
Yep. And the other thing is you may not see it coming. I mean, we meet parents who had no clue, right? I mean, it's not, it's because it's so normalized that your kid has a bad day. I mean, it's at their age, particularly the younger children, like they don't understand. And I'd have to look at the literature, but it's like, when does a child understand the meaning of death? Right? They don't
Right.
understand. They're seeing this on screens and it
Right.
looks like something everyone's doing. And what they're not seeing is, hey, that person doesn't come back. Like you don't, especially those younger children, you don't come back. When I hear about like 10, 11, 12-year olds committing suicide or like there's no real, I don't think there's a real concept. That and online challenges, same thing. They have
Hmm.
no concept. Nobody's saying, hey, you could die if you try this. And by the way,
Right.
that death is final.
Right.
This is like their TV. I mean, this is like their media. This is all that they see and all that they know.
Hmm. And then the choking challenge, what Kristen Bride shared with me, women, a mom she knows whose child, I don't remember, son or daughter, died by the choking challenge, and
Son.
they reported it, son, right? And they said it met community guidelines because he didn't actually die on the video.
Yep. Yep. I mean, we've had parents report drug menus or drug content, like people selling drugs on
Yeah.
Snapchat.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll say, oh, okay. And then other times, oh, this doesn't violate our community guidelines. How is that not? It's all varied because it's not they're reporting, these companies reporting systems are not set up to actually
Hmm.
act because again, that's hitting their bottom line. Right?
Right.
It hits the revenue.
Right.
If they're legitimately taking down all of the deadly stuff that's being reported, the drug dealing, the
Hmm.
suicide, including again children committing suicide.
Hmm.
We had a child who died playing Russian roulette, but a couple of those videos before the last incident, right? Those are up on Snapchat being
Right.
amplified. So
Wow.
it's the platforms are not designed to protect your child. They're not
Hmm.
even designed to act when you affirmatively report something. They are designed
Right.
to protect their revenue because they can. And the
Right.
only industry in the world that I know of, right? I mean, look at Ford Pinto. Look at what happens when companies get caught doing that historically.
Hmm.
They get the book thrown at them, right?
Right.
But these companies, they do it as a matter of course.
So you mentioned COSA. Do you feel like COSA would help make it a bit safer for our kids?
Oh, 100%. I mean,
Okay.
when COSA first came out, I was silent on COSA. I certainly was generally supportive, but the original
Hmm.
iteration of COSA was broad. And
Hmm.
so I certainly, anytime you're going to deal with anything that involves these types of subject matter, like you just have to be careful. You don't want something that is so broad that it restricts speech, that it
Yeah.
um, there were changes made in mid 2023. I mentioned one earlier where, for example, there's a whole limitation in there that if a child is searching for it, there's no liability, right? This is
Okay.
about
Sure.
programming and designs.
Hmm.
So I think the key for COSA is, one, you have specific safeguards. I mean, it straight up says like you have to get rid of mechanisms that are addictive, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
There's no dark patterns, there's no targeting of children for advertising purposes based on one-on-one characteristics, right? It's not. There's a bunch of stuff in there. There's disclosure requirements, independent testing requirements, a lot of great things, and ultimately, it is as a parent. I do not want these companies deciding what my children get to see. These are not libraries. In fact, there's a carve out in COSA for libraries. Libraries are not subject to COSA. Neither are nonprofits, by the way, which a lot of
Mm.
people miss. Nonprofits that so Planned Parenthood or any type of the ACLU, any type of nonprofit could start up a platform or host a platform and put whatever they want on there, and COSA doesn't apply.
Okay.
What COSA is applying to are going to be these for-profit companies that currently are designing and programming their products in a way they know are hurting kids.
Right.
They should know certainly.
Right.
100%, because it means that when you have that instance where a child has died by suicide and you look at their TikTok and you look at their searches and you say, well, this is strange. This child sought out inspirational quotes and
Hmm.
then you buried them in go kill yourself. That's crazy, right? That's not
Crazy.
those are things that arguably then would leave an avenue under COSA to challenge that and say, hey, you don't get to do that.
Right.
You're designing this technology, this piece of your product,
Hmm.
in a way that is promoting suicide, and the child never sought it out.
Right.
So
Okay. So,
COSA will do that. Yeah.
okay. So parents can go to, I think it is passcosa.org just to learn more about it, about the bill. And if they decide to support it, they can contact their state senators, or they find out if their senators are supporting the bill. And then if not, kind of make a request to them. And I
Yep.
know a lot of the parents that I've spoken with are very passionate about, a lot of parents who have experienced harms around social media and their kids are supporting COSA. So that
Yeah.
to me says a lot about this bill.
Well, and also, so look, personally, as a member of the LGBTQ community, it is very important that we not trade off, right? And it
Right,
is very
right.
important that questioning all children, whether they identify as LGBTQ or not, that all children have access to resources.
Yep.
For me, really, the gaslighting, in my opinion, that big tech is running here is, one, they are targeting. So first off, they're targeting LGBTQ kids at higher rates. They are. It's another
Hmm.
it's another vulnerability. It's another set of facts.
Yep.
And it is so upsetting as a member of that community to see these companies hiding behind these kids that I have seen them exploit at greater rates. I've seen them send transphobic content to a 13-year-old transgender child who did not ask for it,
Oh,
right?
Jesus.
And so things like that, it makes me angry because they're hiding behind a community that they are harming.
Right.
Um, the other thing I would say on that again is just to read the new language of COSA for folks, because to me it's those more recent changes, right? The carve outs for the nonprofits, the limitation of if somebody searches for it.
Hmm.
It is not meant to have that effect, nor do I think it will. I mean,
Right.
I always tell people a platform could never take down a single piece of content and
Hmm.
comply with COSA,
Hmm.
because it's about the design and the programming. Or
Yep.
they could take down 5 million pieces of content and still be violating COSA. And that's the key
Hmm.
point. It's not censorship. It's about the design and programming. And I think big tech wants to gloss over that and say, well, conservative AGs are going to use it for all these purposes. And frankly, if that argument were true, then liberal AGs might also come in and say, well, no more gun content, no
Hmm.
more conservative I mean, it really is a rabbit hole in that regard,
Yep.
because it's based on 20 layers of speculation and
Right.
things that are implausible, if not impossible,
Yeah.
under the drafting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I had an interview a couple weeks ago with Alex Fraser of Issue One, and we
Hmm.
talk more about the pushback for COSA specifically, and kind of he addresses these things as well. So there's lots of information in that interview too, if parents want to listen to that one. Um,
Yeah.
So, let's start wrapping up. I mean, parents have a hugely stressful job around technology, probably harder than any parent ever.
Yes.
Keeping our kids safe online can feel really daunting. And obviously, we can make safer decisions, but big tech needs to step up. The government needs to do better to protect us. And until these things happen, parents just have some tough decisions to make. So, do you have any other advice for parents that we haven't touched on so far? There's been a lot so far, but
Yeah, just it's, to the extent you're able, engage your kid, right? Have these discussions, check out these apps, start your own accounts, try to get your kids into adult accounts, if you will, and really be forgiving of yourself. I mean, this is the toughest piece, is that as a parent, the moment a device is in the home, the moment a harm happens in the home, and this is another commonality across
hmm.
every parent blames themselves. That is
Hmm.
natural,
Hmm.
particularly when your child is in your own home. You cannot help but feel like, I didn't do my job.
Right.
I didn't protect my child. And that is a lie in this context, right? Like, these are not harms that we've allowed into our home. These are not harms that we are okay with and that we are making informed decisions about. This is a scenario where these companies have lied, just straight up. I mean, you can see the congressional testimony, and where these companies have lied and said that their products are safe. They've said they're using every available technology to protect your kids. I mean, Snapchat would advertise, this is not an app for strangers, you can only use it if you know each other, but then their quick ad recommending your child to complete strangers. Like, this is not your fault. And I don't, I mean, it's really like, as parents, we have to start to hold these companies accountable and stop blaming each other. There's plenty of blame to go around.
Right.
We can blame each other and also say what these companies are doing is not okay. And that's the biggie. I think it's just being kind to ourselves, asking for help when we need it, trying to issue spot, and not taking it all on ourselves.
Right.
This is happening to millions and millions of parents, not just you,
Right.
right?
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to close out with a quote I saw today from Kristen Bride, who I mentioned previously, and she lost her son Carson
Love
to
Kristen. Yeah,
suicide and being cyberbullied in Snapchat.
yeah.
My interview with her just released today, and it's a good one. So she said, "It should not take grieving parents filing lawsuits on behalf of their dead children to hold this industry accountable for their dangerous and addictive product designs." And though when this does happen, thank goodness that parents have a resource like you, Laura, and the Social Media Victims Law Center to help them through this terrible time in their lives, because this type of resource didn't exist just a few years ago. And personally, I'm just doing all I can to spread awareness on the harms. And I want just to thank you for your time today, for the information that you shared, which is
Yeah.
invaluable to parents. Is there somewhere you parents can connect with you or Social Media Victims Law Center, maybe LinkedIn?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn. I think we have Facebook.
Okay.
If you run traditional search engine, right, for the Social Media
Yeah.
Victims Law Center, you'll see us. And I think there's some resources on our website too. The difficult part is there's not a lot of resources out there, which we're also working to change.
Yep.
But it's reach out and ask for help.
Yep. Absolutely. So parents, I hope you listened closely to this interview. I loved Laura's note about having these conversations with your kids age appropriately, letting them know about the harm. So I hope that parents, you'll be thinking more critically about these decisions around social media and for your family. Cue into my Instagram, because I am trying to keep you guys updated on these lawsuits against Meta and all this stuff that is coming out around harms in social media. So thank you again, Laura, for your time,
Great.
and I hope we stay in
Nikki,
touch.
thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really important.
Oh,
Knowledge is power, and it's what we have right now.
absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right.